It was 9:47 p.m. on a Wednesday when Myra realized she had officially become that employee, the one who stayed behind long after the overhead lights dimmed, hunched over a desk in a sea of empty cubicles, finishing a report no one would read carefully anyway. The office smelled like paper and stale coffee, and her only companion was the soft hum of the copy machine. "You're not saving lives, Mira. You're saving bar graphs," the guy from finance. The guy with the world's driest humor, a collection of slightly ironic coffee mugs, and the most infuriating habit of wearing noise-canceling headphones during team meetings. She stared at the lifeless spreadsheet like it had personally offended her. Just that he had an apartment somewhere near Koreatown, hoping caffeine would fix her bad decisions. A desk full of stress balls shaped like food, and a deeply concerning addiction to sunflower seeds. They'd exchanged maybe a dozen words in the 3 years she'd worked there, but something about seeing him in the late-night glow of the office made him look. When she turned, Nolan was suddenly behind her, holding a paper cup, oddly human, which had been blinking low toner for 3 months. Everyone else had gone home hours ago. The machine finally spat out burnt coffee like it had something against both of them. Head to her Pilates class, grab dinner with friends, and fall asleep watching murder documentaries. She wasn't sure what changed, if it was the promotion she didn't ask for, the team lead who called everything urgent, or the quiet truth she didn't want to admit. Staying late meant avoiding her too quiet apartment. Mira found herself relaxing for the first time all day. Something about the fluorescent lighting, the hum of the fridge, and the shared exhaustion made everything feel oddly cozy. Except for the guy in the corner who Mira was convinced didn't actually work here. She leaned back in her chair, flexed her fingers, and muttered, she wasn't always like this. Just 6 months ago, Mira used to clock out at exactly 6:01 p.m. Mira stood to stretch and noticed the light on at the far end of the office. Every night, she squinted through the glass and saw someone still at their desk, typing. No, not just typing full-on, pounding the keyboard like it owed him money. She tilted her head. Is that ... Nolan? It was Nolan Reyes. There's already a rumor you're secretly married to the copier. Myra didn't know much about him, neither made a move to leave. The vending machine buzzed like a wasp stuck in a jar. She grabbed her thermos empty and wandered toward the break room. Just as she passed Nolan's desk, he looked up. Their eyes met. We should probably get back before HR assumes we've eloped. Oh, Myra blurted. He blinked. Oh, she raised the thermos. Coffee run. He gestured to his can of soda. Same. Not on graphs, not on emails. Her brain was suddenly replaying that smile. That sugar packet. That brief flicker of connection in a place where everyone usually moved like ghosts. Silence. Cool, she said, retreating to the break room like a criminal caught in the act. She stood by the coffee machine, watching it gurgle and hiss. You always stay this late? He asked. She hesitated, not on purpose. Same. They stood there in awkward silence. Mira took a sip and made a face. Nolan chuckled, actually chuckled, and handed her a sugar packet. I think that expired last year, she said. Perfect. Fits the flavor profile. They sipped bad coffee and leaned against the counter like accidental allies. So, she said, what's keeping you here? Budget spreadsheet, he said, then added, and, the quiet. She raised an eyebrow. My place has neighbors who fight about dish soap. Mine has silence so loud I can hear my own guilt, she said. He smiled. That's dramatic. I majored in literature. Explains a lot. She bumped his shoulder lightly. Hey, he shrugged. I meant it in a good way. They stood there a little longer than necessary. Finally, Myra sighed. Too late, he said, deadpan. Only emotionally. He smirked and walked back to his desk. Myra returned to hers but couldn't focus. She looked at the clock. 10:12 p.m. overtime had never felt so oddly pleasant. The next morning, Mira arrived at the office feeling like she had a secret. Not a scandalous, cover-up-the-tracks kind of secret, but the sort that lingered like warm tea in your chest. She tried to shake it off as she rode the elevator up to the 12th floor, balancing her latte and breakfast wrap, but her brain refused to cooperate. Nolan Reyes, budget spreadsheets. And yet now she was replaying his smirk like it was a deleted scene from a rom-com she accidentally stumbled into. Bad coffee. Okay, then explain why Nolan left the office at the exact same time as you last night, an actual moment, in the break room. At 10 p.m., she hadn't even spoken to the guy beyond sarcastic remarks in quarterly meetings. "You're glowing," said Chelsea, her desk neighbor and resident gossip channel. "Can you not create fiction this early in the morning?" If I had to be trapped in an office late at night with someone, Nolan wouldn't be a bad pick. Mysterious, dry, unreasonably good jawline. I'm not glowing. You are? That's your post-flirtation complexion. I did not flirt. Chelsea leaned closer. Mira froze mid-sip and walked away as casually as she could, pretending her ears weren't glowing. "He's not exactly the overtime type," Chelsea added. He had spreadsheets. "Do I get visitation rights for the copier?" "Sure he did." Mira turned back to her computer, cheeks warm. "I'm just saying," Chelsea said, propping her chin on her hand. "I'm reporting you to HR. You are HR." "Exactly." Chelsea grinned like a cat with too much information. "I knew it." Someone had added her and Nolan to the unofficial office crush grid, a whiteboard by the water cooler filled with doodles, initials and arrows that HR pretended not to notice. By lunch, the imaginary office romance had already evolved into a full-blown narrative. "I heard their food doesn't scream when you heat it." As Mira passed by, she saw a sticky note labeled MN in loopy handwriting. A table tucked between a fake ficus and an outlet charging 4 phones at once. Mira had a grilled cheese with tomato soup. Why did I do this? Nolan ordered a tuna melt that he stared at suspiciously for a good minute before taking a bite. I eventually escaped using a clipboard in blind panic. Emails, reports, some minor catastrophe involving a missing contract. She was doing fine until she received a message from Nolan. Oh God. She plucked the note off, crumpled it. Back at her desk, Mira tried to focus on her actual job. He told her about his first job at a car wash, how he used to think capers were tiny alien eggs, and how he once got locked in the office bathroom for an hour because the latch broke. Spreadsheets, phone calls, meetings that could have been emails. But when Mira passed Nolan's desk at 4:17 p.m., she saw a new sticky note stuck to the edge of his monitor. "Nolan R., I hear we're dating now." She nearly choked on her water. Mira J. Only on Tuesdays, she's high maintenance. A softness between them, quiet and unspoken, like they were slowly unraveling a thread they didn't know existed. Nolan R., I like a challenge. She stared at her screen, heart pounding at a frankly unreasonable rate. There was a knock on the partition. She looked up. "Lunch?" He asked, one eyebrow raised. "Are you ... asking me out?" "I'm asking you to rescue me from instant noodles and that microwave burrito with trust issues." "Where?" "Deli across the street." She grabbed her coat. They sat in the sunlit corner of the deli. "I hate tuna," he said after chewing. She laughed. Over the next 30 minutes, they talked about everything and nothing. "I yelled for help," he said, and no one came. Mira was laughing so hard she had to put her spoon down. "You should write a memoir. You think anyone would read it?" "I would." There it was again, that moment. Back at the office, everything resumed like normal, only on Tuesdays. She smiled. By Thursday afternoon, Mira had officially reached the phase where she reread email threads twice just to make sure she wasn't accidentally flirting in plain text. It was ridiculous. She was a professional, an adult, a respected member of the HR team. But something about Nolan's messages made her heart skip like a scratched CD. She told herself it was nothing. Probably just post-stress hormones. Office proximity syndrome. That weird phenomenon where spending too much time in the same fluorescent space, Mira saw a message pop up in the company chat. Made people develop temporary feelings for coworkers just because they didn't have the energy to meet new people. And yet, when Nolan casually mentioned staying late again, she'd replied, "I'll be here. Pizza is my coping mechanism." He didn't respond right away. 3 hours later, when most of the office had cleared out and only a few keyboards were still clicking, Nolan, or pepperoni or pineapple? Don't say pineapple, I'll report you. Might as well add violators of policy 6.3b, unauthorized consumption of Italian cuisine. She grinned, stretching his legs out and glancing around the darkened office. Mira J. Eating slices of lukewarm pepperoni and laughing about their shared disdain for motivational posters. Mira couldn't remember the last time she had this much fun at work, or maybe fun in general. Pepperoni, I'm not a monster. Sometimes I wonder if we're all just going through the motions. Nolan or impressive. We might just survive this quarter after all. 10 minutes later, he appeared at her desk with a pizza box and 2 cans of sparkling water. No punchline, no sarcasm. Just truth hanging between them like a shared weight. She blinked. "You actually ordered it? I'm a man of my word. You're also going to get us written up for food smells." I thought I'd live in a tiny apartment filled with books, wear oversized cardigans, and write emotional essays about heartbreak. We're already on the office gossip board. She laughed and scooted her chair aside to make room. They sat together, using an empty filing cabinet as a makeshift table. That we not just ticking boxes so someone in a corner office can buy another smart fridge. It's small, chill, nothing fancy. I was gonna go, but if you're around, maybe you'd want to come with. At some point, Nolan leaned back against the wall. You ever feel like we're all just pretending? She paused. Pretending what? That this job matters? Are you drunk on sparkling water? Maybe, he said, then added quietly, I don't know. I'm asking if you want to listen to mediocre acoustic covers with overpriced cider and maybe pretend we ring out coworkers for a night. Mira looked at him. Really looked. Honestly? Yeah, I feel that way a lot. Their eyes met. I used to want to be a writer, she admitted. Nolan raised an eyebrow. Really? Yeah, and now you manage benefits and conflict resolution. Exactly. Living the dream. He nudged her foot gently. You're good at it, though. Thanks. You're good at ... spreadsheets. High praise, he said, pretending to tip an imaginary hat. After they finished the pizza, Nolan stood up and dusted crumbs off his jeans. There's something tonight, he said, suddenly awkward. She tilted her head. Something? My friend is playing at this bar in Echo Park. Mira blinked. Are you asking me out? He looked sheepish. That's dangerously close to romance. Just enough to make HR nervous. He deadpanned. She smiled. Yeah, she said, I'd like that. Mira didn't usually say yes to spontaneous anything. She liked plans. Glancing up at the flickering neon sign that just read E__O now. But I guess they gave up. She liked knowing where she was going and what shoes to wear. In a tiny stage that barely had room for the guitarist tuning up his strings. The crowd was hip in that I found this jacket on the sidewalkway. Mira felt wildly overdressed in her work blouse and slacks. But an hour after she agreed to go with Nolan, she found herself standing outside a dimly lit bar in Echo Park with chipped black paint on the windows and a bouncer who looked like he hadn't blinked since Tuesday. Careful not to be rude, but also too distracted by each other to pay attention. Mira learned that Nolan had 2 sisters. Hated peanut butter, and I had to explain to the campus office why our smoke alarm was in the freezer. And once lost a bet in college that resulted in a very permanent, very regrettable tattoo. though he refused to say where. "This place has character," she said, her dad's habit of labeling everything with masking tape. He teased. And how she once auditioned for a school play and passed out on stage from nerves. Nolan's hand brushed against hers on the table. "It used to say Echo," Nolan said, holding the door for her. Inside was exactly what she expected. Too many Edison bulbs, tiny wooden tables. The crowd thinned out, replaced by streetlights and the sounds of cars hissing by on Sunset Boulevard. "You could have warned me," she muttered. "You look great," Nolan said, like it was obvious. Mira felt the city hum under her skin, that strange blend of static and potential only Los Angeles seemed to offer. She didn't want the night to end. She flushed. They grabbed a seat near the back, and Nolan ordered them each a cider that came in mason jars with chunks of apple floating inside. Mira took a sip and immediately winced. "Oh God, it tastes like regret." He laughed. "That's how you know it's artisanal." They talked through the first act. "I think mistakes usually feel worse than this." She told him about her dog as a kid. Then he said softly, "Like the start of something." "Was that the moment you realized HR was your calling?" "No. That was when my roommate nearly burned down our dorm that made everyone in the room feel like their ex had just texted, 'Hope you're good.'" At 2 Atma's street lamp above them buzzed faintly. He didn't make a move. He just stood there with his hands in his pockets and the kind of quiet in his eyes that said everything and nothing all at once. Nolan leaned closer so he could whisper over the music. "Classic." The second act was better, an acoustic trio with sad harmonies. "You ever think about quitting and moving to a coastal town to open a bookstore?" "Only every other Monday. Thanks for tonight." "And the in-between Mondays? Coffee shop?" "With a cat that hates everyone but me. Nice." The music drifted through the air like a late summer wind. Mira found herself swaying slightly, cider forgotten. Neither of them moved away. By the time the music ended, it was late. "I'll walk you to your car," he said. "You don't have to. I know." They stepped out into the cool night. Her car was parked 3 blocks away. They walked slowly. "I had fun," she said. "Me too." Silence. "You think this is a mistake?" she asked quietly. He paused. "Not really," he said. She glanced at him. "What does this feel like?" He looked at her, expression unreadable for a moment. Her heart stuttered. They stopped beside her car. "I should go," she said. "Yeah." She reached for her door handle, then paused. "Anytime." He didn't lean in. Mira smiled. "See you Monday." He nodded. "See you Monday." She got in and drove away before she could do anything stupid like turn around and kiss him. The office didn't smell like romance on Monday. It smelled like burnt coffee, toner ink, and that strange citrus-scented air freshener facilities insisted on spraying near the vents. She was early as always. She made her way to the break room, grabbed her mug from the cabinet labeled MJ, and stared at the coffee maker like it personally wronged her. Then she poured herself a cup anyway. Employees are reminded to maintain professional boundaries during work hours and on company property. Romantic relationships between coworkers are discouraged and must be disclosed if they affect department operations or the chain of command. But Mira walked indifferently slower, more aware of the way her shoes tapped against the tile, how the lights hummed above her, how her heart fluttered as she passed Nolan's desk. They'd had pizza, listened to music, then tilted her screen slightly so he could see the email. She hadn't even held his hand. But somehow this email felt personal. Like a warning shot across a sea she hadn't realized she'd already set sail on. He wasn't there. The way a light-hearted connection had suddenly grown an edge. Like walking a tightrope while someone below read the policy manual out loud. Of course not. She took notes, nodded at charts, and tried not to glance at Nolan sitting 3 seats down. I was planning to rewrite the employee handbook in blood. Back at her desk, she opened her email. Unless you confessed your love in your Outlook calendar. 5 flagged messages, 2 meeting reminders, and 1 from office announcements. She clicked it absently. I'll ruin it by ordering something with an umbrella. Glancing around to make sure no one else was nearby. We could grab a drink. Off company property. No spreadsheets allowed. Subject: company policy reminder, workplace relationships. She almost spilled her coffee. The kind that made the buildings look like they were dreaming. The bar was tucked above a bookstore with string lights and mismatched chairs. They sat under a crooked parasol, sipping overpriced cocktails and pretending the day hadn't happened. Not trendy. At the way the city lights danced in his eyes, at the way his fingers tapped nervously against his glass. No Edison bulbs. The email was vague but clear enough. While we value a supportive and connected work environment, Mira stared at the screen, her pulse thudding in her ears. She hadn't done anything wrong. Not just for the day, but for every part of herself that had doubted she deserved moments like this. Just then, Nolan walked in, casual as ever, a thermos in hand and that small, crooked smile she was starting to memorize. "Morning," he said, pausing by her desk. She looked up, blinking fast. "Hey." Then he leaned in and whispered, "Do you think they installed microphones in the pepperoni? You okay?" She hesitated. He read it, expression unreadable. She laughed because she needed to, because the panic bubbling in her stomach needed somewhere to go. "I think we're fine," he added. She shook her head. "But it's weird timing, right? Corporate paranoia. Someone probably made eye contact in the break room, and now legal thinks we were seconds away from a scandal." Still, she felt it, the shift. Later that afternoon, Mira sat through a team meeting where no one mentioned the memo, but everyone seemed unusually stiff. Or maybe she was imagining it. When the meeting ended, he caught up to her in the hallway. "Hey," he said. "You doing anything after work?" She hesitated, very on brand. He ran a hand through his hair. She smiled despite herself. "Where?" "There's this tiny rooftop bar downtown." "That sounds suspiciously adult." "Don't worry," she laughed. "Okay, yeah." After work, they met outside. The sky had turned a soft lavender. "Do you regret it?" she asked halfway through her drink. He didn't ask what she meant. He knew. "No," he said. "Do you?" "I don't know. Maybe I will. But right now?" She looked at him. "Right now, I'm just glad you hate pineapple." He smiled, and it felt like forgiveness. And just like that, the weight lifted a little. By Wednesday, Mira was convinced the edge of our universe had cursed her. Not because of the memo, or even the awkwardness that had crept into her department like a slow leak, but because she was being asked to lead a seminar on healthy workplace boundaries. She stared at the invite on her calendar in disbelief. Subject: required training, Wednesday, 2 p.m. facilitator, Mira Johnson. And the irony is delicious. Topic: maintaining professional boundaries and avoiding conflicts of interest. She considered setting her own laptop on fire. "Are they serious?" she muttered. "Yes," said Becca, her cubicle neighbor, who had clearly leaned over to peek. "I'm going to walk into that room and be stoned with passive-aggressive questions." "At least you'll get cookies," Becca said brightly. "Maybe they think you're the most qualified." Nolan appeared a moment later, holding 2 coffees. "One for the martyr," he said, handing her the cup. "They know you can deliver bad news while sounding like you rereading a bedtime story." Mira took it with a grateful sigh. Mira stood in the small conference room in front of 25 employees and a tray of slightly stale oatmeal cookies. In a 10-minute video that looks like it was filmed in 2004, she cleared her throat. It featured 2 actors pretending to be co-workers who developed an inappropriate relationship. After sharing a lunch break and bonding over a mutual love of Sudoku, Mira stared blankly at the screen and wondered if anyone had ever actually fallen in love over Sudoku. But hypothetically, they weren't in the same department. Only if it impacts job performance, creates a perception of favoritism, or violates company policies. Really? She almost laughed. Would that still count as a conflict? As the room emptied, Nolan lingered. Probably not. Adjusted her cardigan and forced a smile. I can't believe they scheduled me to deliver this. US. I just know it's more than I expected. He raised an eyebrow. She gave him a look. Or he added, should I open with a joke? We're going to have to be careful, not touching. Just close enough that she felt it warmth, tension, the quiet hum of something unnamed. Absolutely. So at 2 p.m. sharp, I'm Mira from HR. Today's seminar is on workplace boundaries, which I realize sounds about as exciting as waiting in line at the DMV. Good afternoon, everyone. A few polite chuckles. But don't worry, there will be cookies, mild discomfort. The video, as promised, was excruciating. When the lights came back on, she opened the floor for questions. Just ... Tacos and bad movies? No HR manuals, I promise. No one raised a hand. Then, of course, Gary from accounting cleared his throat. So, he said slowly, if someone were seeing a coworker, Mira smiled her most professional smile. Gary nodded sagely. Good to know. Nolan, seated in the back corner, raised an eyebrow and mouthed at Gary. The session ended without anyone setting off a fire alarm, which Mira considered a win. You did great, he said. Thanks, I only died inside 6 times. 7, by my count. They stood there in the now empty room, the silence a little more charged than before. I don't know what this is, she said finally. He nodded. Same. She glanced at the door. I can do careful. You say that, but you're the guy who put ketchup on his eggs in front of my boss. It's a bold move, shows confidence. Shows chaos. He laughed, then stepped closer. Come over tonight, he said softly. Mira blinked. To your place? No pressure. She hesitated. I'll think about it, she whispered. But the truth was already settled in her chest. She'd say yes. Mira had one rule for herself when it came to visiting coworkers' apartments. Dawn to do it. Not unless it was for a group hang, a work event, or someone's birthday, and even then, she brought chips, stayed for exactly 1.5 hours, and left before things got weird. So why was she now standing in front of Nolan's apartment door, holding a 6-pack of Mexican cola and a paper bag full of extra hot sauce? Because her rules had clearly dissolved the moment he smiled at her across the HR seminar table, like they shared some inside joke about Sudoku seduction. Nolan opened the door in a soft gray t-shirt and jeans that should vape in illegal on a Tuesday. His apartment smelled like cilantro, lime, and something sizzling in the pan. You came, he said, like he wasn't entirely sure she would. I brought reinforcements, she said, holding up the bag and bottles. He stepped aside. You are officially promoted to co-chef. The place was warm and cozy. Not overly clean, not messy, just lived in. A plant teetered on the edge of a bookshelf. A record player spun something soft in the corner. She spotted a framed photo of a dog wearing sunglasses on his kitchen counter and raised an eyebrow. My sister's doing, Nolan said. He's our childhood pup, Max. She said he needed a touch of glamour. I respect that. The tacos were simple steak, onion, lime, and Nolan was surprisingly good in the kitchen. He handed her a plate and they sat on the couch, a bad 90s rom-com playing in the background. Halfway through the movie, Mira asked, Do you ever think this is a terrible idea? He didn't even pretend to misunderstand. Constantly. And? I keep doing it anyway. She looked down at her taco. Same. He nudged her lightly with his shoulder. You're allowed to want things. Even things that come with HR memos and PowerPoint presentations. He grinned. Especially those. They fell into her rhythm jokes, soft silences, bites of food in between bursts of laughter. Mira hadn't laughed like this in a long time. Not the polite chuckles she gave at work. Real, belly-deep, tear-inducing laughter. The kind that loosened knots she didn't even know were there. At one point, Nolan got up to grab napkins. Mira took the opportunity to glance around the room again. On his bookshelf, next to a stack of novels and a half-burned candle, was a small Polaroid. She leaned in. It was Nolan with an older woman, his mom, probably both mid-laugh, standing in front of a hot dog stand. They looked happy. "Careful," he said, returning with the napkins. "That's a rare photo of me voluntarily outdoors. I like it. You look like someone who says yes to things, most of the time." They returned to the couch. This time, when their hands brushed, neither of them moved away. The movie ended. Neither of them noticed. "I should go," Mira said eventually. "Okay," but she didn't move. And neither did he. She turned to face him. "I don't know what happens next." He looked at her, really looked at her. "We figure it out. One rule at a time," she smiled. Rule number 1, no falling asleep during HR training videos. Brutal. Rule 2, if you bring tacos, they better be authentic. "Is this you laying down the law?" "I am the law," she said with mock seriousness. He leaned in a little closer. "Then arrest me." Mira laughed, too loud, too sudden, to herself. And then, without another word, she kissed him. Quick, sure, soft. It wasn't fireworks. It wasn't a Hollywood moment. It was better. It was real. Mira woke up the next morning, not in Nolan's apartment, but in her own bed, alone, fully dressed, no scandal, no walk of shame. Just this strange, dreamy feeling like she'd crossed the line and landed somewhere she couldn't quite name. The kiss had been perfect in its imperfection, awkward, soft, sweet, and full of possibility. And the way Nolan had looked at her afterward, all amused affection and barely hidden nerves, had left her heart buzzing the whole Uber ride home. Now, as she sipped burnt coffee from a paper cup and rode the elevator to the 17th floor, reality started to settle in. Work. Where Nolan was. Where her boss was. Where Gary from accounting probably still thought Sudoku was sexy. She stepped out of the elevator and walked to her cubicle like someone approaching a high-stakes poker table. Nolan's desk was empty, but there was a post-it on her monitor. "Emergency meeting, conference room C, bring caffeine, trust me." Nair sighed and grabbed her coffee. Conference room C was the one with the sticky door and the sad artificial plant that leaned like it had given up on hope. When she entered, Nolan was already there, looking too put together for someone who'd been charmingly nervous 12 hours ago. He handed her a file. "You're going to hate this." She opened it. It was a spreadsheet, not just any spreadsheet. A monster of a spreadsheet, color-coded cells, pivot tables, multiple tabs labeled things like projections, staffing howl, and budget doom. "What am I looking at?" she asked. "The new Q3 performance matrix." She blinked. "I didn't know we had one." "We didn't, until this morning. Corporate wants it by Friday. And they want it to sing. What does that even mean?" "No idea, but I think we're about to find out." They spent the next 3 hours in spreadsheet purgatory merging cells, cross-checking formulas, arguing over whether the color salmon was too aggressive for the at-risk column. At some point, Mira stole half of Nolan's muffin, and he retaliated by locking her out of the formatting tools. "You're a menace," she muttered. "You kissed this menace?" She flushed instantly. "Keep your voice down," he smirked. "No regrets." "None," she said, too quickly, too honestly. They paused. The air shifted again. In the sterile, fluorescent-lit conference room with budget horror staring back at them from every cell, Mira realized she wasn't scared. Nolan leaned back in his chair. "We're going to have to keep it quiet, just until the Q3 madness dies down." "You mean until we forget how to feel emotions?" "Exactly." She smiled. "Deal." They worked until lunchtime. breaking only to steal mini pretzels from the receptionist's snack stash. As they packed up, Mira asked, "So, what are we now?" Nolan paused. "People? Funny. I mean, we're people who kissed, people who like each other, people who probably shouldn't flirt near Gary. I swear, if Gary starts a rumor about Sudoku again, he's already started referring to us as the data duo." Mira groaned. "Please stop. No can do." He left a sticky note on my chair that said, "Don't forget to color code your heart." She blinked. "That's terrifyingly poetic, right?" They stepped out of the conference room and walked back to their desks, a safe 5 feet apart. The office buzzed around them. Phones rang, printers jammed. Someone sneezed loudly in the break room. And through it all, Mira felt strangely grounded. The memo hadn't changed how she felt. The spreadsheet hadn't killed the magic. They were just two people trying to make it work between deadlines, emails, and corporate chaos. And so far, it was kind of wonderful. By Thursday, Mira had developed a twitch in her right eye. Not from stress, not from caffeine withdrawal, but from Nolan's smug little grins every time they passed in the hallway, like they were cast members in a slow burn rom-com. No one else had caught on to yet. They were, in a word, reckless. Not that they'd done anything. No more kisses. No shared cabs. Not even a clandestine taco handoff in the supply closet. But the way he looked at her, it made the inside of her stomach fizz like soda. Even now, as she reviewed the final edits on the Q3 performance spreadsheet, Mira could feel him in the room. Not physically, he was still in a meeting, but somehow present. Like he'd left a smirk behind on her keyboard. "Why are you smiling?" asked Becca, glancing over the divider. "A knot? You're smiling with your eyebrows?" "That's not a thing." Becca narrowed her eyes. "It is when someone's in lieu of." Mira threw a paper clip at her. Across the room, the IT guy named Phil arrived at Nolan's desk with a toolkit and a suspiciously large monitor. "Are we getting an upgrade?" Becca asked. "Doubt it," Mira said, but she kept watching. Phil tapped a few keys, frowned, then turned to Mira. "Hey, Mira, Nolan said to ask you, he lost access to the HR drive." She blinked. "Why would he need access?" Phil shrugged. "You'll have to ask him." She grabbed her ID and made her way to the small meeting room where Nolan was half sitting on the table, eating an apple like he was on a break in a rom-com starring spreadsheets and awkward office romance. "You sent Phil to me?" she asked. He swallowed a bite. "I figured if I made a request, it might go faster if you were involved. You know, HR monitors who accesses that drive. That's why I asked nicely." Mira crossed her arms. "You trying to get me fired?" He stood, brushing crumbs off his jeans. "Never. I'm just hoping you'll give me one of those training videos again so I can fall asleep listening to your voice." She rolled her eyes, trying not to smile. "You're the worst," she muttered, "and yet you're here." She turned toward the door. "Fine, I'll approve the access for today. But only because you're redoing data reconciliation, and I do rather not be roped into another budget doomsday." "Fair. Also, Phil thinks you're suspicious now." "I'm suspicious I eat apples with a knife." "You're not a detective in a 1940s noir, yet." She shook her head and left. Later that day, as Mira was walking to the printer, she caught a glimpse of her own reflection in the window. She looked different, more awake, more herself. That night, as she packed her bag to go home, Nolan passed by her desk. Casually, like he wasn't watching her the entire time. "Drinks tomorrow?" he said under his breath. She didn't look up. "Only if you promise not to talk about spreadsheets." "I make no promises." Then he was gone. Mira didn't smile until after he turned the corner. Mira arrived at the bar precisely 6 minutes late, which was the perfect amount of time to appear cool, slightly busy, but not disrespectfully tardy. She spotted Nolan at a corner booth, already nursing something dark and overpriced looking. He stood up when he saw her and pulled out her chair. "Chivalry?" she said, raising an eyebrow. "Only on Fridays," he replied. "Saturdays I'm all sarcasm." She sat, brushing imaginary lint off her jacket. "So, Mr. Q3 spreadsheet, what's on the agenda tonight?" No budgets, no bar graphs, no Gary from accounting. A dream. The bar was dim and cozy, the kind of place with shelves of mismatched books, board games missing all the important pieces, and a chalkboard menu with drink names like the Existential Crisis and Payroll Punch. Mira ordered the latter. It was blue. She chose not to ask questions. They talked about everything and nothing: bad dates, worse landlords, their shared love for old jazz records and documentaries that put them to sleep. Mira found herself laughing more than she had all week. Nolan was charming in a deeply uncool way. He made dumb jokes. He spilled salsa on his sleeve, and when she reached over to wipe it off with a napkin, she realized her hand lingered a second too long. "Are we doing this?" he asked, soft, cautious. Mira looked at him, really looked. His eyes weren't daring or intense or anything from a movie. They were just open, like he was giving her all the space in the world to decide. "Yeah," she said quietly. "We're doing this." They leaned in together, not rushed, not dramatic. Their kiss was slow, patient, as if both of them were checking in every second to make sure the other was still there, still okay, still wanting this. And she did. She wanted this. They broke apart with matching smiles. "So," Nolan said, "do we make some rules?" "Oh, definitely. Rule 1, if we start dating, we don't tell anyone at work. Not until we know it's real." "Agreed." Rule 2, absolutely no PDA at the office. No secret hand-holding behind the photocopier. "I mean, unless it's a really romantic copier." She laughed. "Fine, no copier intimacy." Rule 3, Nolan said, "we keep things honest. If this gets weird, we talk, even if it's you who gets weird. Especially if it's me." They clinked glasses to seal the deal. An hour later, they were walking home under city lights, shoulders brushing every few steps. It was cold, but not uncomfortable. Outside Mira's building, they paused. Nolan glanced up at the windows. "So, want to call it a night?" She hesitated. "Not yet," she said. He looked up, brows raised. "I have tea," she offered, and a couch, and a very judgmental cat. "Perfect." Back in her apartment, they sat on opposite ends of the couch like two kids on a school trip. Mira poured them each a mug of tea while her cat Mizzo glared from the top of the fridge. "He doesn't like men," she warned. "I'll win him over," Nolan whispered confidently. Mizzo hissed, "Or not." They drank tea. They talked more. And when Mira dozed off with her head on Nolan's shoulder, he didn't move for an hour. Just sat there, arm curled around her, completely still, like if he shifted, he'd break whatever spell had settled between them. And maybe he was right, because whatever this was, it was no longer just a workplace crush. The next morning, Mira woke to the blaring sound of her alarm and the even more alarming realization that Nolan was still on her couch. Not shirtless, not scandalous, just there, asleep, with one leg awkwardly hanging off the edge and her cat curled on his chest like it had finally declared him worthy. She stared for a long moment, quietly panicking. She had 5 meetings that day. She hadn't packed lunch. She hadn't even done her hair. Also, there was a man in her living room who had become her workplace secret boyfriend in less than a week. She tiptoed past him and got ready in record time, pulling her hair into a bun that screamed competent adult with hidden romance. Nolan stirred just as she was slipping on her shoes. "Morning," he said, voice still scratchy with sleep. "You snore," she replied. "You drool." She pointed at him with a mock glare. "Lie again, and I'll replace your ergonomic keyboard with a 1997 click-clacker." He laughed, rubbing his face. "Did I seriously fall asleep here?" "You did." I had dreams about Mizzo judging me. He does that when he likes someone. Oh, good, I think. Mira poured him coffee and handed it over with a soft smile. Don't make this weird. Never, he said, holding her gaze for a heartbeat too long. Work was a minefield of glances that lasted a second too long and conversations about collaborative synergy that somehow sounded like code for I kissed you next to a stack of client reports. Mira kept her cool, mostly. But lunchtime, that's when the chaos began. Because Gary, ever observant, never subtle, approached her desk with narrowed eyes. I noticed you and Nolan left at the same time yesterday, he said. And you wore different shoes today. What does that have to do with anything? Means you either stayed somewhere else or changed outfits this morning. Gary, yes, you need a hobby. I have one. It's spotting lovebirds in disguise. Mira groaned and spun in her chair. Go alphabetize the printer paper or something? Across the room, Nolan was fighting back a grin. When she caught his eye, he lifted a sticky note that said, Rule 4, never let Gary win. Mira smiled despite herself. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Meetings, deadlines. One fire drill that had absolutely nothing to do with Mira, maybe accidentally burning popcorn in the microwave. Nolan sent her messages like, emergency spreadsheet therapy needed. And do you think the boss would notice if I replaced all the fonts with Comic Sans? By 5 p.m., they were both drained, eyes glassy from too many graphs. Mira packed up slowly, waiting until most people had cleared out. Nolan lingered by the printer. When they were finally alone in the elevator, he reached over and tapped her knuckles. I liked waking up with your cat on my chest. I liked that you didn't scream when he did that. I liked the tea too. I liked that you didn't use my favorite mug. Out of fear. They grinned, leaning just slightly closer, not quite touching. When the elevator dinged, they stepped out together, walking into the evening like two people who had no idea where this was headed, but didn't mind the uncertainty. Because in between spreadsheets and sarcasm, something real was quietly unfolding. And for now, that was enough. By Monday, the unspoken rule between Mira and Nolan was clear. Flirt at your own risk. Whisper during coffee breaks, and never under any circumstances let the copier jam while you're standing too close. Because that's exactly how they ended up trapped in the copy room at 3:22 p.m. Both bent over the machine, elbows bumping, trying to rescue a quarterly report now fused to the toner drum like a hostage. This thing is cursed, Nolan muttered. You pressed the wrong setting again, didn't you? I swear it wasn't me this time. You clicked duplex collate landscape autobind. That sounds fancy. Mira gave him a look. It also printed a blank map of Portugal and jammed on page 2. I'm beginning to think this copier has emotional issues. They yanked open trays, turned dials, and Mira reached into the belly of the beast like a mechanic preparing for battle. When she pulled out the crumpled page, it was torn in half, smudged, and somehow had a sticky note fused to it that read, Gary's yogurt do not touch. They both stared. I think we've uncovered a conspiracy, Nolan said solemnly. Gary's been hiding food inside the copier. I'm reporting this to IT, or we burn it down. Very subtle. Nolan stood up and took a deep breath. I swear, one day this office will implode from copier-related rage, and we'll be the only survivors, bonded by toner and trauma. She smirked, tossing the mangled paper aside. Let's go. As they stepped out, Nolan reached for her hand, but stopped short when they saw Gary walking toward them, holding a suspicious-looking smoothie. He eyed them. Was that copier jam your fault? No, they said in unison, stepping apart like they'd been caught shoplifting. Gary squinted. You two have been acting strange lately? Mira smiled tightly. Must be the copier fumes. Nolan coughed. Highly toxic. Makes people overly polite. Gary frowned and walked away, muttering something about workplace safety protocols. Back at their desks, Mira dropped into her chair, heart still racing. There was something thrilling about it, these near misses, these little moments of closeness hidden in plain sight. Later that afternoon, Nolan pinged her on Slack. "Nolan, if we get caught, I'm blaming you." "Mira, bold of you to assume I'd stick around to take the fall." "Nolan, so you'd leave me to face Gary's wrath alone?" "Mira, I write you a very nice eulogy." She couldn't stop smiling. That night, she got home, flopped on her couch, and thought about the ridiculousness of the day. It wasn't just the copier or the secret chats or the Gary avoidance strategies, it was him. He made the monotony feel like a sitcom. He made the hours pass faster. He made her laugh when all she wanted to do was cry about broken formulas. She opened her phone and scrolled through their message thread. At the bottom was a new message from Nolan. "Nolan, I know we said no talking about work stuff outside work hours, but today was kind of perfect." Even with the copier jam, Mira stared at the screen, thumb hovering. Then she typed, "Mira, you're welcome for saving you from toner death." And Mira, "I like today too." Mira didn't plan to invite Nolan over again. Not because she didn't want to, she definitely did, but because she had a strict policy about not mixing too much cozy domesticity with her professional chaos. Unfortunately, that policy crumbled the moment she accidentally ordered a family-sized pizza at 8:14 p.m. on a Wednesday. "Do you want half of a pizza the size of my kitchen table?" She texted him. Nolan replied in exactly 10 seconds. "Nolan, you had me a pizza." 35 minutes later, he showed up in joggers, holding a bottle of overpriced lemonade and looking like the world's least threatening intruder. "I also brought these," he said, pulling 2 boxes of cookies from his coat, because emotional support sugar is a lifestyle. They ate on the couch with the pizza box between them like a peace treaty. Mira's cat stared silently, as if silently judging their choices. Halfway through the second slice, the apartment went dark, not metaphorically, just completely dark. "Power outage?" Nolan asked, mouthful of crust. Mira peered out the window. Streetlights were down too. "Looks like the whole block." "Is this a sign?" "From the pizza gods? No, from your fuse box? Maybe you're not meant to reheat mozzarella in this dimension." They both laughed, but Mira couldn't help the slight nervous edge to her voice. She didn't do well with silence, or darkness, or unexpected changes of plan. Nolan picked up on it quickly. "Hey," he said gently, "it's just a blackout. Worst case scenario, we have to eat the rest of the pizza cold. And talk like humans without internet. What a nightmare." He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. "Don't worry. I've got a flashlight app, 3 downloaded podcasts, and at least 2 games that don't require Wi-Fi. You are oddly prepared for the apocalypse. I once had a 3-hour subway delay. It changed me." They lit a few candles from Mira's kitchen drawer, most of them scented like things no one actually wanted to smell, like harvest linen and citrus log cabin. The living room glowed soft gold, shadows stretching long across the walls. Mira wrapped herself in a blanket, trying to look casual. "Truth or dare?" Nolan said suddenly. She blinked. "Are we 12? 17 tops?" "Fine. Truth." He thought for a moment. "What's something you're afraid of that no one knows?" She exhaled slowly. "Okay. Real answer? I'm afraid that I peaked in college. That the version of me who knew what she wanted disappeared somewhere between unpaid internships and bad landlords." Nolan nodded, quiet. "You haven't peaked. You're just in a long, weird chapter. Your turn." "Truth," he said without hesitation. "What's something you've never told anyone at the office?" He took a second. "I actually wanted to be a writer. I studied creative writing. But after graduation, I needed a job. So I told myself marketing was just storytelling with data." Mira smiled. "You still write?" He shook his head. "Not since I started full-time." but sometimes I narrate the company memos in my head like dramatic monologues. That explains the tone in your meeting notes. They both laughed again, the kind of laughter that settles into your ribs and stays there for hours. Silence followed, but this time it wasn't awkward. It was peaceful. The pizza was almost gone. The air smelled like citrus failure and burnt linen. And the boy she'd once viewed as a quiet desk neighbor was now sitting beside her in candlelight, looking like home. "Can I say something maybe dumb?" Nolan asked. "Only if it's also a little dramatic. I think I'm falling for you." Mira looked at him, eyes wide, heart thudding. "You think?" He gave a sheepish smile. "Okay, I know." The lights flickered back on with a loud hum, and they both squinted, moment ruined and yet maybe perfectly timed. Mira leaned in anyway. Good, because they already fell. There are a few universally known truths in office culture. The best snacks disappear by 10 a.m. Gary will always have something suspiciously personal to say, and nothing, absolutely nothing, stirs up drama like being spotted leaving the same meeting room together. Mira knew this. She respected this, which is why she should be known better than to follow Nolan into the fourth floor brainstorming lounge without checking if anyone was around. But there they were, laughing over leftover conference sandwiches, Nolan wiping honey mustard off her cheek like he had every right to. And of course, the second the door creaked open, and walked Sharon from HR, carrying 3 folders and the curiosity of 1,000 reality show contestants. "Oh," Sharon blinked. "Didn't realize this room was booked." Mira practically threw herself to her feet. "We were just, brainstorming." "Definitely brainstorming," Nolan added. "About quarterly synergy alignment," Mira blurted. Sharon smiled like someone who knew exactly what was happening and didn't care. "Carry on, you two. Just pretend I wasn't here." And then she backed out slowly, shutting the door with the gentleness of a librarian who'd walked in on a forbidden kiss. "Think we're doomed?" Mira asked. "Only if she sends Gary a memo." Mira groaned. "We'll be office legends by lunchtime." "Infamous is still fame," Nolan offered with a smirk. Back at their desks, things had shifted. Eyes lingered a little longer. Conversations hushed when they walked by. Even the intern gave them a thumbs up and whispered, "Power couple." Mira slid into her chair and stared blankly at her screen. "Have we broken the unspoken rule?" she asked Nolan during their lunch break. "Which one?" "The one about not dating at work, or looking too happy, or existing with joy within 10 feet of the coffee machine." He tilted his head. "I don't remember joy being banned in the employee handbook. Neither do I, but Gary probably lobbied for it." They took their lunch outside, sitting on a bench across from the building's lobby. The city moved around them, traffic, wind, fragments of other people's lives passing in snippets. "You know," Nolan said, chewing on a too-dry sandwich, "we could just be honest." Mira blinked. "About us?" "Yeah, I mean, it's not like we've done anything wrong." She hesitated. Not because she was afraid of the relationship, but because she liked the little bubble they had built, secret, soft, safe. "What if it changes everything?" she asked. "It might." "And what if it's better?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he leaned back, watching the clouds shift overhead. "Then we deal with it, together." That night, Mira sat in bed with her laptop, trying to finish a project, but mostly just rereading Nolan's old texts. She stopped at one message from 2 weeks ago. "Nolan, the day you told Gary off was the day I knew I liked you. Anyone who can intimidate Gary without raising their voice is powerful." She laughed out loud. Then came a knock on her door. And there he was, wearing a hoodie, holding bubble tea. "I figured," Nolan said, "you might need backup for end-of-week emails." Mira grinned and opened the door wider. "Only if I get the mango one." "You wound me," he said, handing it over. "That was supposed to be mine. Guess love is sacrifice." They sat together, bubble tea in hand, side by side again. And while the emails piled up and the office gossips prepared their next theories, Mira realized something important. Sometimes the best kind of love story is the one that sneaks up during overtime and refuses to leave when the lights go out. Friday came with the strange clarity that only a week full of almost confessions, suspicious HR encounters, and shared bubble tea could bring. The office was buzzing with end-of-week energy, the kind that made people work just a little faster, laugh a little louder, and count down the hours until freedom. Mira, however, was already planning to stay late. Not because she had to, but because she wanted to. Nolan was staying too, naturally. They hadn't officially said what they were yet, no declarations, no social media posts, no labels, but somehow everyone already knew. Gary even winked at them by the coffee machine and offered Nolan a high five. Nolan did not high five him. Mira, to her credit, fled. By 6:03 p.m., the office was nearly empty. By 6:15, it was just the two of them again. Mira sat on the edge of her desk, dangling a paperclip chain between her fingers, while Nolan scrolled through a spreadsheet that didn't really need scrolling. Outside, the sunset painted the windows orange. "This feels familiar," Mira said. "Hauntingly so," Nolan replied. "Let me guess. The copier is going to jam, and Gary's going to reappear asking if we borrowed his ergonomic chair. I still think Gary's chair is haunted. No, Gary's snacks are haunted." They laughed dizzily. That was the thing Mira liked best about him. How easy it was. No pressure, no performative romance. Just a natural, comforting presence that fit beside her like a missing puzzle piece. He set the laptop aside and looked up at her. "You staying late because you want to, or because you're hoping I'd offer to walk you home again? Can it be both? Always?" They packed up slowly, stalling like teenagers at the end of a perfect date. Mira grabbed her coat. Nolan held the door open. They walked through the empty hallways like they were the last people on Earth. At the elevator, she hit the button. It glowed softly. "Is this the part where I do something brave?" Nolan said suddenly. Mira turned toward him. "Oh, yeah, something bold. Something movie-worthy." She raised an eyebrow. "Should I brace myself?" He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "You know how I said I used to write?" She nodded. "Well, I wrote this. Just one page. Don't read it now. Wait until you get home." Mira accepted it, surprised. "What is it?" "Something I couldn't say in a Slack message." The elevator arrived with a ding. Nolan didn't move. "I'm gonna stay behind," he said. "Got a few things to finish." "Excuse me? You're ditching me for spreadsheets?" "I'm ditching you for suspense." She rolled her eyes. "Fine. But if I get mugged, I'm haunting your Outlook calendar." "Deal." Back home, Mira kicked off her shoes, dropped her bag, and sat on her couch with the paper still in hand. It was handwritten slightly messy, slanted. "Definitely Nolan's," she read. "Dear Mira, I didn't know what I was getting into when I first got assigned to the cube beside you. I didn't know how someone could make me want to come in early for meetings I used to dread, or how emails could feel flirtatious, or how bubble tea and spreadsheet commentary could be a love language. I just wanted you to know that no matter what happens, whether we stay in this weird phase of almost dating, or whether you start ignoring my calendar invites, I'm grateful for your sarcasm, for your unexpected kindness, for the way you make this office feel like something more than beige walls and burnt coffee. If this ends tomorrow, I'll still think of it as one of the best surprises of my life. But I hope it doesn't end." "Not yet." Nolan Mira folded the letter gently. Then she opened her phone and sent one line. "Mira, okay, let's not let it end." At that moment, Nolan's reply popped up. "Nolan, so does this mean I can ask you out properly now?" "Mira, you already did, just in paper form." and outside on the street corner where her window overlooked the sidewalk, she saw him standing, waiting, holding 2 bubble teas again, smiling like a man who knew he'd just won the lottery. This time, she didn't hesitate. She ran down to meet him, not because she was afraid of missing the moment, but because, finally, overtime was over and something beautiful had just begun.